They all watched suspiciously as the poor delivery boy approached the millionaire's daughter in her wheelchair. The security guard reached for his radio, but when the boy revealed what he knew about angles and momentum, the girl's father dropped his phone in shock. The alarm blared at 5:30 a.m. Marcus's hand shot out from under the thin blanket, smacking the plastic clock on his nightstand. His fingers found the off button without looking. The morning was still dark outside his window, but he had no time to be tired. "Marcus, you up?" His mother's voice carried through the thin walls of their apartment. "Yeah, Mom." He sat up, his feet hitting the cold floor. The springs of his old mattress creaked beneath him. Marcus grabbed his worn jeans from the chair beside his bed and pulled them on. The fabric was thin at the knees, but they'd have to last a few more months. He picked up the white t-shirt he'd laid out the night before and sniffed it. Still clean enough. In the kitchen, his mother stood at the counter, packing her lunch for her double shift at the diner. Her nurse's aide uniform hung pressed on the back of a chair. Dark circles lined her eyes, but she managed to smile. "There's eggs," she said, nodding toward the stove. "Made them before my uniform got on." Marcus grabbed a plate and scooped up the scrambled eggs. They were barely warm, but he wouldn't complain. Food was food. "Got all your deliveries mapped out?" she asked, zipping up her lunch bag. "Yeah," he spoke between bites. "Added 2 new houses on Oak Street. Rich people actually still want paper newspapers." He tried to keep the edge out of his voice, but it slipped through anyway. His mother paused, studying him. "Just be careful, baby. Some of those security guards—" "I know, Mom. I keep my head down. Do my job." Marcus scraped the last bits of egg from his plate. The memory of yesterday's guard following him with suspicious eyes made his stomach tighten. Outside, the sky was turning gray as Marcus wheeled his bicycle from the storage closet by their apartment. The metal frame was scratched, the seat patched with duct tape, but it was his ticket to earning money. He began his pre-delivery check. Tires, chain, brakes, his hands froze on the brake cable. Something felt wrong. He squeezed the lever, and it went all the way to the handlebar with no resistance. "No, no, no." Marcus crouched down, examining the brake mechanism. The cable was frayed almost completely through. One more hard stop, and it would snap. He checked his watch. 6:15 a.m. The newspaper bundles would be waiting at the corner store. Mr. Chun didn't like late pickups. Marcus's mind raced through his options. No money for repairs. No time to walk the route. A car horn blared in the distance, and Marcus flinched. For a moment, he was 6 years old again, watching his father's car disappear around the corner. The same empty feeling settled in his chest. "Just gotta be extra careful," he muttered, standing up. No choice. He wheeled the bike to the street, the broken brake cable a constant presence in his mind. The newspaper bundles would be heavy today. Thursday meant extra advertisements. The corner store's lights were already on when Marcus arrived. Mr. Chen stood outside, arms crossed. "You're late," the old man said, but his eyes were kind. "Sorry, Mr. Chen. Bike trouble." Marcus began loading the newspaper bundles onto his bike's basket and makeshift side carriers he'd rigged up with bungee cords. "Should get that fixed." "Yeah." Marcus secured the last bundle. "Soon as I can." The wealthy neighborhoods were waking up as Marcus made his deliveries. Gardeners' trucks lined the streets, and security patrol cars crawled past him every few minutes. He kept his movements efficient. Grab paper, roll it, toss it onto the porch. Don't make eye contact. Don't linger. At the Golden Gates community entrance, the guard booth loomed ahead. Marcus's shoulders tensed as he approached. New guy today. Crew cut. Square jaw. Already reaching for the radio at his belt. Purpose of visit? The guard's voice was clipped. Marcus held up a newspaper. Deliveries. I'm on the approved list. The guard checked his clipboard slowly, deliberately. Marcus felt sweat forming under his t-shirt, despite the morning chill. Proceed. The guard's eyes followed him through the gate. Inside the community, Marcus's bike wheels whispered against the smooth pavement. Houses rose like mountains on either side, all perfect lawns and gleaming windows. A Mercedes SUV rolled past, the driver looking straight ahead as if Marcus was invisible. He made his deliveries quickly, every movement practiced. The broken brake cable meant he had to coast to careful stops, using his feet when necessary. Each house got its paper in exactly the right spot, These people complained if it was even an inch out of place. His phone buzzed in his pocket. Text from mom, working late tonight. Leftovers in fridge. Love you. Marcus typed back one-handed. Okay. Love you too. He didn't mention the break. She had enough to worry about. The morning sun climbed higher as Marcus finished his route. Back outside the gated community, a stream of luxury cars headed toward the business district. Marcus watched them pass as he caught his breath on a bench. A kid about his age sat in the back of a passing Bentley, head down, probably playing on the latest iPhone. Marcus thought about his own phone, a 3-year-old model with a cracked screen that his mother had bought refurbished. Different worlds, he muttered, standing up. The weight of the empty newspaper bags felt lighter, but the pressure in his chest had grown heavier. He still had 2 hours before school. Just enough time to get home, change, and maybe look up some bike repair videos. The library had computers he could use during lunch break. As Marcus pedaled home, carefully managing his speed without reliable brakes, he ran the numbers in his head. 3 weeks of deliveries might get him enough for repairs if he didn't eat lunch at school. Or maybe Mr. Chin knew someone who could fix it cheaper. The sun was fully up now, warming his back as he rode. Around him, the city was fully awake, everyone rushing to their own responsibilities. Marcus straightened his shoulders. He had responsibilities too, broken brakes or not. His mother's voice echoed in his head. We do what we have to do. Marcus nodded to himself, picking up speed as he headed home. The bike rattled beneath him, the broken brake, cable bouncing against the frame like a reminder of everything that needed fixing in his life. But for now, he just needed to make it home, get to school, and figure out tomorrow's route. One day at a time, that's all anyone could do. Marcus slid into his seat in physics class just as the bell rang. His uniform shirt was still damp from the quick change after his morning deliveries, but at least he'd made it. Around him, other students pulled out their notebooks, the room filling with the sound of rustling paper and quiet conversations. All right, everyone. Mr. Rodriguez walked to the front of the class, marker in hand. Today we're talking about forces and momentum. Who remembers what we covered last week about angles and velocity? The class fell silent. Marcus looked down at his notebook, not wanting to draw attention. But the equations on the board caught his eye. They were exactly what he calculated every morning on his route, figuring out how to handle his loaded bike on steep hills. Mr. Rodriguez's marker squeaked against the whiteboard. When an object moves down an inclined plane, what forces are acting on it? More silence. Marcus's hand twitched, but he kept it down. Come on, people. Mr. Rodriguez turned to face the class. This isn't just textbook stuff. You use this every day. Walking down hills, riding bikes, gravity and friction, Marcus said, the words coming out before he could stop them. The class turned to look at him. Mr. Rodriguez smiled. Exactly. And how do they interact? Marcus sat up straighter. Gravity pulls down, but because of the angle, only part of it makes the object move down the slope. Friction works against the motion. Perfect. Mr. Rodriguez started writing equations. The steeper the angle, the more gravity affects the motion, Marcus finished. That's why you have to be careful on steep hills. A few students snickered. Marcus felt his face grow hot, but Mr. Rodriguez nodded enthusiastically. This is exactly the kind of real-world application we're looking for. Marcus, could you come up and show us how you'd calculate the force on, say, a loaded bicycle going down a 15-degree slope? Marcus walked to the board, aware of every eye on him. His hands were steady as he wrote out the equations, the same ones he used every day without really thinking about them. The total mass affects how much force you're dealing with, he explained, surprising himself with how confident he sounded. So if you've got a heavy load, you need to account for that in your calculations. Excellent. Mr. Rodriguez clapped him on the shoulder. This is why physics matters, class. It's not just numbers on a board. It's about understanding how things move in the real world. Back at his desk, Marcus felt a mix of pride and embarrassment. Behind him, he heard whispers. Since when is the delivery boy a physics genius? The rest of the morning passed in a blur of classes. At lunch, Marcus headed to the library instead of the cafeteria. He needed those computers more than he needed food today. The library computers were old and slow, but they worked. Marcus typed bicycle brake cable repair into the search bar. Video after video showed up, but most required tools he didn't have. No food in the library. The librarian called out as Marcus's stomach growled. Sorry, he muttered, closing the browser. He'd have to figure something else out. The afternoon sun was hot when Marcus started his second delivery route. Different papers this time, local advertisers who paid him directly. The broken brake cable felt more dangerous with each passing hour. His phone buzzed. Text from his mom, got called in early. Extra shift. Don't wait up. Love you. Marcus texted back a heart emoji. His mom would be on her feet for the next 12 hours, probably longer. His bike problem seemed small in comparison. The route took him past shops closing for the day, past restaurants filling up with early dinner crowds. The smell of food made his empty stomach ache, but he pushed on. At a red light, a group of kids from his school crossed the street, laughing and carrying takeout bags. One of them, Kevin from his physics class, caught his eye and started to wave, then stopped when he saw Marcus's delivery bags. The light turned green. Marcus pedaled on, his jaw tight. The weight of the undelivered papers pressed against his back. Just keep moving, he whispered to himself, his father's old words coming back to him. It was one of the last things he'd said before leaving. Life's about keeping moving, son. Back then, Marcus thought it was wisdom. Now he knew better. The sun was setting when Marcus finished his last delivery. His legs ached, and his stomach felt hollow. But the day wasn't over. He still had homework to do. At home, the apartment was dark and quiet. Marcus heated up leftover rice and beans, eating straight from the container while he spread his physics homework across the kitchen table. The problems were about friction and momentum, exactly what he'd talked about in class. His pencil moved quickly across the paper, the numbers making perfect sense. If only everything else made as much sense as physics. His phone showed a missed call from Mr. Chun, probably about tomorrow's deliveries. Marcus would have to call him back, tell him about the brake situation, maybe work out some kind of payment plan for repairs. Outside his window, the city lights blinked on one by one. Somewhere out there, his mom was serving dinner to strangers. Somewhere, his dad was wherever he was. And here was Marcus, surrounded by physics problems that couldn't solve his real problems. He looked at his last calculation. Force equals mass times acceleration. Simple, clean. Unlike life, where the forces pushing you down weren't so easy to calculate. Marcus closed his textbook and checked his phone. 9:45 p.m. He needed to sleep. Tomorrow's papers wouldn't deliver themselves. But first, he had to figure out a route that avoided the steepest hills. Without working brakes, every descent was a risk. In his room, he could hear the neighbors' TV through the wall. Someone was laughing at a sitcom joke. Marcus lay on his bed, still fully dressed, and set his alarm for 5:30 a.m. The springs creaked under him as he shifted, trying to get comfortable. In 5 hours, he'd do it all again. Different day, same hustle, same stares from security guards, same calculations about hills and momentum, same empty stomach and tired legs. But at least he understood physics. At least there was one thing in his life that made perfect logical sense. Maybe that was something to hold on to. His eyes closed, and the last thing he saw was the equation from class floating in his mind. Force equals mass times acceleration. Tomorrow, he'd need all the force he could get. The next morning hit Marcus like a punch to the gut. His alarm didn't go off, or maybe he'd slept through it. Either way, he was already 15 minutes behind schedule. Damn it. He jumped out of bed, stumbling over his physics textbook. No time for breakfast. No time for anything except throwing on yesterday's clothes and grabbing his delivery bags. His mom had already left double shift again. A note on the fridge read, "Made you lunch. Love you." Next to it was a brown paper bag. Marcus stuffed it into his backpack, guilt mixing with gratitude. Outside, the pre-dawn air bit at his skin. His bike waited where he'd left it, the broken brake cable a dark thread against the frame. Mr. Chin would be waiting, probably already annoyed. Late again? Mr. Chin stood among stacks of newspapers, arms crossed. Sorry. Alarm didn't. No excuses. Just load up. Mr. Chin's voice was gruff, but he helped Marcus stack the bundles. Extra papers today. New clients on Highland Drive. Marcus froze. Highland Drive? That's where all the mansions are, yes. Good money there. Don't mess it up. Highland Drive meant the steepest hills in the city. With broken brakes, it would be like riding a loaded missile downhill. But Marcus couldn't say no. Not to new clients, not to more money. Got it, he said, securing the last bundle. The sun was just starting to paint the sky pink as Marcus approached Highland Drive. His shirt was already soaked with sweat, partly from rushing, partly from anxiety. The houses here made the ones in Golden Gate's community look modest. Each one sat behind its own gate, with driveways longer than entire streets in Marcus's neighborhood. Just take it slow, he muttered, starting up the first hill. One delivery at a time. The first few houses went smoothly. Marcus walked his bike up the hills and coasted down carefully, using his feet to control his speed. It took longer, but it was safer. Then he saw it, the longest, steepest driveway yet. The mailbox read Winchester. The house at the top looked like something from a magazine, all glass and stone and morning light. Marcus was halfway up the driveway when he heard it, a soft sound like someone trying not to cry. He looked around, then up toward the house. Near the top of the driveway, where it leveled off into a wide parking area, a girl sat in a wheelchair. She was small, maybe 12 or 13, wearing what looked like a private school uniform. She was gripping her wheels tight, staring down the steep ramp that ran alongside the main steps. A man in an expensive suit stood at the top of the steps, phone to his ear. Yes, I understand the merger meeting is important, but my daughter, the security guard by the front door, took a step forward, hand moving to his radio. Miss Emily, please wait for assistance. I can do it myself. The girl's voice shook. I just need a minute. Marcus stood frozen, his bike loaded with papers, watching. The girl, Emily, moved her wheelchair forward an inch, then jerked back, her knuckles white on the wheels. The security guard spoke into his radio. We may need assistance at the front. I don't need more people watching me. Emily's voice cracked. A tear rolled down her cheek. Marcus looked at the ramp. The angle was steep, probably 20 degrees. Without momentum control, a wheelchair could easily pick up too much speed. But with the right approach, his hands moved before his brain could stop them. He laid his bike down carefully, newspapers safely on their side. Physics equations flashed through his mind as he took a step toward the ramp. The security guard's head snapped toward him. Hey, delivery boy, stay where you are. Marcus, he said, his voice steadier than he felt. My name is Marcus. Emily turned her head to look at him. Her eyes were red but fierce. Are you going to tell me to wait for help too? Marcus took another step forward. The guard's radio crackled. Emily's father lowered his phone slowly, watching. No, Marcus said. I'm going to ask if you want to learn about angles and momentum. The morning sun hit the glass walls of the house, reflecting light everywhere. For a moment, everything was still. The guard with his hand on his radio, the father with his phone half raised, Emily in her wheelchair, and Marcus, standing there in his sweaty delivery clothes, about to either make a huge mistake or do something right. Emily wiped her eyes with the back of her hand. What do you mean, angles and momentum? Marcus took another step. The guard tensed but didn't move. Marcus said that this ramp is just physics. And physics? That's something I understand. He was close enough now to see Emily's hands trembling on her wheels. Close enough to see the fear in her eyes fighting with something else. Hope, maybe, or determination. Her father took a step forward. Young man, Dad. Emily cut him off. Let him talk. The sun climbed higher in the sky. Somewhere in the city, papers weren't being delivered. Mr. Chin was probably wondering where Marcus was. His bike lay on its side, broken brake cable catching the morning light. But none of that mattered right now. What mattered was the girl in the wheelchair, the steep ramp, and the simple, beautiful laws of physics that could help her down it safely. Marcus took a deep breath and looked Emily in the eye. Would you like to hear about how we're going to do this? The security guard's radio crackled again. Emily's father stood frozen on the steps. And Emily smiled, just a little, through her tears. Yes, she said. Tell me about physics. Marcus walked up the remaining distance to Emily's wheelchair, every step deliberate. The security guard's radio buzzed with static, but Marcus kept his eyes on Emily. First thing about physics, he said, keeping his voice calm, is understanding what you're working with. This ramp, What's got you worried about it? Emily's hands flexed on her wheelchair's wheels. I fell once. 3 months ago. Different ramp, but she swallowed hard. It was steep like this one. Can I? Marcus gestured to the space beside her wheelchair. When she nodded, he crouched down to get at eye level. The security guard took a half step forward. Sir, I really think we should wait for... For what? Emily's father's voice cut through the morning air. He was watching Marcus intently, phone forgotten in his hand. Let's hear what he has to say. Marcus pointed to the ramp surface. See these grooves? They're for traction. That's our first advantage. And the railings, they're not just for show. They're part of our safety system. Safety system? Emily looked at him skeptically. Everything in physics is about systems. Marcus stood up, walked to the top of the ramp. Your wheelchair, the ramp, gravity, friction, they're all parts working together. The trick is making them work for us, not against us. A small crowd of household staff had gathered at the doorway. Marcus heard whispers, felt the stares, but kept his focus on Emily. When I do my paper route, he continued, I have to calculate slopes all the time. My bike's brakes are broken, so I need to understand exactly how gravity and friction work together. Emily's father frowned. Your brakes are broken? Not important right now, Marcus said quickly. What's important is understanding momentum control. Emily, have you noticed how the ramp has 3 sections? She nodded. Each section is a different angle. The first part here is the steepest, but it's also the shortest. That's where we'll need the most control. The security guard stepped closer. Listen, kid, if anything happens, nothing's going to happen, Marcus said firmly. Because we're going to do this step by step, using science. Emily, what do you remember about friction from school? It's a force that resists motion. Her voice grew stronger as she spoke. Exactly. And with these grooved surfaces, we've got plenty of friction to work with. Your wheels, can I check them? Emily nodded again. Marcus knelt down, examined the wheels carefully. Good tread. Working brakes. This is good. We've got all the tools we need. He looked up at Emily. Now we just need one more thing. What's that? Trust. Marcus stood up, held her gaze. Do you trust physics? Emily gave a small laugh. I guess. Good. Because physics never lies. 2 + 2 always equals 4. Gravity always pulls down. And friction. He gripped the wheelchair's handles lightly. Friction is always our friend on a slope. More people had gathered. A chef in his whites, a housekeeper with a duster in her hand, a gardener still holding his shears. All watching, all waiting. Emily's father stepped off the stairs, moved closer. Explain exactly what you're planning. Marcus pointed down the ramp. 3 sections, 3 phases. First section, steepest but shortest. We control speed with the handbrakes. Second section levels out a bit. That's our recovery zone. Third section is the longest but gentlest slope. That's where we build confidence. You seem to know a lot about this, Emily's father said slowly. Marcus shrugged. Physics is physics, sir. Whether it's newspapers on a bike or a wheelchair on a ramp, the laws don't change. A car pulled up in the circular driveway below. A woman in medical scrubs stepped out, presumably Emily's professional aide. Oh, great, Emily muttered. Now everyone's here to watch me. Hey. Marcus moved to face her again. They're not here to watch you fail. They're here to see you succeed. Big difference. The aide was hurrying up the driveway. Emily, I'm so sorry I'm late. It's okay, Emily's father called down. We're trying something new. Marcus placed his hands on the wheelchair's handles again. Emily, first thing, you're in control. Your hands on your wheels, your brakes ready. I'm just here as backup, like a safety net? Exactly. Physics is our plan, but you're the pilot. The aide reached the top of the ramp, slightly out of breath. What's going on? Who is? This is Marcus, Emily said. He's teaching me about physics. Marcus noticed the aide exchange looks with the security guard, saw the doubt in their eyes. But Emily's voice had grown stronger, more confident. Ready to try the first section? He asked her. Emily took a deep breath. Tell me again about the physics. Gravity wants to pull you straight down. Marcus traced the path with his finger. But the ramp breaks that force into 2 components. One pushing you forward, one pushing you into the ramp. The steeper the angle, the more forward force. And that's why the first part is hardest? Exactly. But remember, you've got three types of control. Your wheels, your brakes, and me. Triple redundancy. That's engineering talk for really, really safe. A smile flickered across Emily's face. Did you learn that in physics class too? Nah. YouTube videos about bike repair. For the first time that morning, Emily actually laughed. The sound seemed to break some of the tension in the air. Okay, she said, let's do this. For science? Marcus grinned. For science? He positioned himself behind the wheelchair, hands ready but not gripping. You're in charge. When you're ready, release your brakes just a tiny bit. Emily nodded, her face set in concentration. Her hands moved to the brake levers. The crowd held its breath. The security guard's radio had gone silent. Even the birds seemed to be watching. 3, Marcus said softly. 2, 1. Emily's fingers loosened on the brakes, and the wheelchair began to move. The wheelchair rolled forward inches at a time. Emily's hands shook slightly on her brakes, but she kept them steady enough to maintain a crawling pace. Perfect, Marcus said quietly. You're doing great. Feel how the groove patterns give you extra grip. Emily nodded, too focused to speak. Her knuckles were white on the brake levers. Remember to breathe, Marcus coached. Sometimes when we're scared, we forget to breathe. Emily let out a shaky breath she hadn't realized she was holding. They'd moved maybe 2 feet down the steepest section. The security guard stepped closer to the ramp's railing. Maybe we should. Carl, Emily's father, cut him off. Let them work. Marcus kept his voice steady, speaking just loud enough for Emily to hear. You know what this reminds me of? My first time riding down Hill Street with a full load of papers. Scared me half to death. What? Emily swallowed, adjusted her grip. What happened? I went so slow. A lady walking her dog passed me. He grinned at the memory. She asked if I needed help. That got another small laugh from Emily. The wheelchair moved forward another few inches. See how you're feeling the ramp through your wheels? Marcus asked. That's your body learning the physics. Your brain is calculating angles and friction without you even knowing it. They were a quarter of the way down the first section now. Above them, the crowd had grown silent, watching the careful descent. Tell me about your bike, Emily said suddenly. The one with the broken brakes? Marcus blinked in surprise, but understood what she was doing, talking to stay calm. It's nothing special. Old mountain bike I got from a thrift store. Been fixing it up piece by piece. Is that how you learned about momentum and stuff? Part of it. Rest was from physics class, though I never thought I'd be using it like this. They reached the transition point between the first and second sections. Emily tensed. This is where it gets easier, Marcus said quickly. Feel how the angle changes? Less gravity pulling you forward. You can loosen your grip just a tiny bit. Emily's fingers relaxed fractionally on the brakes. The wheelchair rolled more smoothly now. The 8 had moved to stand beside Emily's father. He actually knows what he's talking about, she whispered, but in the quiet morning air, everyone heard it. Force equals mass times acceleration, Marcus recited. But friction and angles change how those forces work. Emily's got it perfect. Just enough brake pressure to control the acceleration. You sound like my physics teacher, Emily said, managing a small smile. Better looking though, right? Emily snorted with surprise, then quickly recovered her concentration. They were halfway down the second section now. Marcus noticed her father checking his watch. The man looked torn between concern for his daughter and awareness of his waiting commitments. Almost to the last section, Marcus said. This is where you get to feel like a pro. Emily's confidence had grown visibly. Her grip on the brakes was more relaxed, her movements smoother. The groove pattern changes here, she noted, surprising Marcus. You noticed that? Most people don't. Yeah, they made it wider for better traction on the longer slope. The security guard, Carl, had put his radio away and was watching with unconcealed interest. How do you know all this stuff about ramps and surfaces? He asked. Marcus kept his eyes on Emily's progress as he answered. When you deliver papers in all kinds of weather, you learn fast. Different surfaces, different angles. Mess up once and you're picking up scattered newspapers in the rain. They reached the final section. The slope here was gentle, almost flat. Ready to feel what momentum control really means? Marcus asked. Emily nodded. Okay. Ease up on the brakes just a little more. Let physics do some of the work. The wheelchair rolled more freely now. Emily's smile grew as she felt the smooth motion. I'm doing it, she whispered. Then louder. I'm actually doing it. You were always capable, Marcus said. You just needed to trust the physics. In yourself. They were 3/4 of the way down now. The gathered crowd had started to drift apart, seeing that the crisis was over. Emily's father spoke into his phone, rescheduled the meeting. Some things are more important. He ended the call and watched his daughter's progress with quiet pride. Last few feet, Marcus announced. Want to try it solo? Emily hesitated for just a moment, then nodded firmly. Yes. Marcus lifted his hands away from the wheelchair, still walking beside it. All yours, pilot. Emily guided the wheelchair the final distance, coming to a perfect stop at the bottom of the ramp. For a moment, no one spoke. Then Emily threw her arms up in triumph. That was awesome. The remaining spectators broke into spontaneous applause. Emily's face glowed with accomplishment. Marcus stepped back, suddenly aware that his newspapers were still lying at the top of the driveway. I should probably wait. Emily grabbed his wrist. Thank you. Not just for helping me down, but for making me understand how it works. Marcus shrugged, uncomfortable with the attention. Like I said, physics never lies. Emily's father was walking down the ramp toward them, his expression thoughtful. Young man, he began. But before he could continue, another voice cut through the morning air. Marcus! Mr. Chin's angry shout carried up the driveway. Where are my newspapers? Reality crashed back in. Marcus looked at his abandoned bike, the waiting papers, his whole morning route thrown off schedule. I have to go, he said quickly. I'm really late. But Emily started to protest. Marcus was already jogging up the ramp, his legs burning from the earlier climb. Physics never lies, he called back over his shoulder. Remember that. He grabbed his bike, quickly checked that the papers were intact. As he started back down the driveway, he heard Emily's father calling after him, but he couldn't stop. Mr. Chin was waiting, and he still had a full route to deliver. Behind him, Emily sat in her wheelchair at the bottom of the ramp, watching him go. She looked different now, confident, accomplished, like someone who had just discovered a new power. Marcus smiled as he pedaled away. Physics might never lie, but it sure could change things. Marcus, wait! Mr. Chin's voice had an unfamiliar note in it. Not anger, but something else. Marcus slowed his bike, looking back. Mr. Chin was climbing out of his old delivery van, parked at the bottom of the Winchester driveway. Sir, I'm sorry about the papers. I can explain. Explain? I just watched you talk physics with John Winchester's daughter. Mr. Chin's face broke into an unexpected grin. Do you know who he is? Marcus shook his head, glancing back up the driveway. Emily and her father were speaking with the aide, their figures small in the distance. Only the biggest real estate developer in the city. And you? Mr. Chin shook his head in amazement. You just taught his daughter about momentum. I was just trying to help, Marcus said. The papers. Forget the papers for a minute. Mr. Chun grabbed a bundle from his van. Help me deliver these, and tell me exactly what happened up there. As they walked back up the driveway, Marcus explained about the ramp, the physics, and Emily's determination. Mr. Chun listened intently, nodding. They were halfway up when Emily's father, Mr. Winchester, started down toward them. Young man, he called. Marcus, was it? Marcus straightened up, suddenly very aware of his worn clothes and messy hair. Yes, sir. Emily tells me you're having trouble with your bicycle brakes. Marcus shot a glance at Mr. Chun, who nodded encouragingly. Yes, sir. The cable's frayed. I'm saving up for repairs. Mr. Winchester raised an eyebrow. Yet you're still making deliveries? No choice, sir. Bills don't pay themselves. A moment of silence passed. Mr. Winchester studied Marcus with an intensity that made him want to fidget. What you did just now, Mr. Winchester said slowly, talking my daughter through that descent. That wasn't just physics, was it? Marcus shifted the newspaper bundle in his arms. Sir, you gave her back her confidence, made her understand the science instead of fear the slope. He paused. That's a rare gift. Marcus struggled to find the right words. I know what it's like when something seems impossible. Sometimes you just need someone to break it down into pieces you can handle. Mr. Winchester nodded thoughtfully. Emily has physical therapy 3 times a week. But between sessions, she needs someone to help her stay active, build confidence. Someone who understands both the physical principles and the mental challenges. Marcus's heart started beating faster. Was this going where he thought it was going? Sir, Mr. Chen cut in. Marcus is one of my most reliable delivery boys. Works every morning before school. And after school? Mr. Winchester asked. Local paper route. Plus odd jobs when I can get them. Mr. Winchester checked his watch. A gesture Marcus had seen him make several times that morning. I have a meeting to get to, but I'd like to discuss a potential position with you. Part-time, after school. Working with Emily, Marcus's mind raced. A real job. Steady income. Maybe enough to fix his bike, help his mom with bills. He looked at Mr. Chun. The old shopkeeper smiled. We can adjust your route. Maybe find someone to handle the afternoon papers. Could I think about it? Marcus asked, then quickly added, Not that I'm not interested, sir. It's a big change. Mr. Winchester actually smiled. Careful consideration of important decisions. Another good quality. He pulled out a business card. Have your mother call my office. We'll set up a proper meeting. Marcus took the card carefully, as if it might disappear. Dad! Emily's voice carried down the driveway. She was wheeling herself up the gentle slope, the aide hovering nearby. Is Marcus staying? We're discussing it, Mr. Winchester called back. To Marcus, he added quietly, though I suspect my daughter has already made up her mind. Emily reached them, slightly out of breath, but grinning. That was the first time I'd gone up the ramp by myself since, well, you know. Marcus couldn't help smiling back. Different angle, different challenge. But same physics. See, Dad? He explains things so I actually understand them. Mr. Winchester checked his watch one final time. I really do have to go. Marcus, have your mother call. Emily, don't be late for your music lesson. He strode toward a sleek black car that had pulled up silently during their conversation. The driver held the door open, and within moments, they were gone. Emily turned to Marcus. You will think about it, right? The job? Marcus looked at the business card in his hand, then at Mr. Chun, who was pretending to be very interested in organizing newspapers. Yeah, he said. I'll think about it. Good. Emily spun her wheelchair with newfound confidence. Because I want to learn more about momentum, and maybe help you fix that bike. The aide cleared her throat. Miss Emily, your lesson? I'm going. Emily started toward the house, then looked back. See you soon, Marcus. That's physics too, a prediction based on observable evidence. Marcus watched her go, the business card still in his hand. Mr. Chun clapped him on the shoulder. Come on, the old man said. Let's finish these deliveries. You can tell me more about how you turned a broken brake cable into a job offer. They walked back to the van together, the morning sun now fully bright above them. Marcus's bike leaned against the van's side, its broken cable catching the light. Mr. Chun, Marcus said suddenly, do you think my mom will believe any of this? The shopkeeper laughed. Physics never lies, right? That's what you kept saying up there. Yeah. Marcus smiled, touching the card in his pocket. Physics never lies. The rest of the morning passed in a blur. Mr. Chin drove Marcus through his remaining delivery route, something he'd never done before. As they tossed papers onto porches and driveways, Marcus kept touching his pocket, making sure the business card was still there. Earth to Marcus. Mr. Chun waved a newspaper in front of his face. That's the third house you've missed. Sorry. Marcus grabbed the paper, jogged up to the correct house. His mind kept drifting back to the Winchester driveway, to Emily's triumph at the bottom of the ramp. Back in the van, Mr. Chin glanced at him. You're worried about something? It wasn't a question. Marcus stared out the window, watching the neighborhood scroll by. What if? He hesitated. What if I'm not what they're looking for? I'm just a delivery boy. Just a delivery boy? Mr. Chin snorted. Did you see yourself up there? Breaking down complex physics for a scared kid, turning it into something she could understand? That's not just anything. Marcus shifted in his seat. But Mr. Winchester, he's like important. Rich. What's he going to think when he meets my mom? Sees where we live. He's already seen what matters. Mr. Chin pulled up to another house. He saw you solve a problem everyone else was afraid to tackle. The morning deliveries finished earlier than usual with Mr. Chin's help. As they drove back to the store, Marcus's phone buzzed. Text from his mom. On break. Everything okay? You never called back this morning. Marcus stared at the screen. How could he explain everything that had happened? You should tell her now, Mr. Chin said, parking behind his store. Don't wait. Marcus nodded, dialed his mom's number. She picked up on the first ring. Baby? What's going on? Mom? Marcus took a deep breath. Something happened this morning. On my route. Something good. He told her everything. About Emily, the ramp, Mr. Winchester's offer. His mother was silent for so long, he thought the call had dropped. Mom? I'm here. Her voice was thick with emotion. My boy, teaching physics to help someone. Your father never would have. She trailed off, but Marcus understood. His father had always taken the easy way out. Marcus had chosen the harder path. Mr. Winchester wants you to call his office, Marcus said. To set up a meeting? I'll do it on my lunch break. His mother's voice was stronger now. What time do you finish school today? Early day. Out at 2. Good. I'll try to schedule something for this afternoon. You got your good shirt at home? Yeah. Marcus smiled. His mom always thought about the practical details. After hanging up, he helped Mr. Chin unload the remaining papers. The old man disappeared into his store's back room and returned with a paper bag. Here, he thrust it at Marcus. Lunch. You missed breakfast, right? Marcus took the bag gratefully. Inside was a sandwich and an apple. Mr. Chun, I eat. Go to school. Make us all proud. The old man turned away gruffly. And fix that damn bike before you kill yourself. Marcus walked to school, eating as he went. The morning felt surreal. Had he really talked physics with a millionaire's daughter? Had he actually helped solve a problem that adults couldn't figure out? The business card in his pocket said yes. School passed in a daze. In physics class, Mr. Rodriguez called on him again, but Marcus barely registered the question. His mind was on wheelchair ramps and gravity vectors. At lunch, his phone buzzed again. Text from his mom. Meeting set for 4 p.m. Coming home early to go with you. Marcus stared at the message. His mom never left work early. Never. The afternoon classes crawled by. When the final bell rang, Marcus practically ran out of the building. He had just enough time to get home, change, and hey, delivery boy. He turned. A group of kids from his physics class was walking toward him. Kevin, the one who'd seen him on his route yesterday, led the pack. That true about you teaching some rich guy's daughter? Marcus tensed. How did you? My dad's gardener works that neighborhood. Said you were like some kind of physics genius, helping a kid in a wheelchair. I just explained some basic concepts, Marcus said carefully. Kevin nodded slowly. Think you could explain some to us? Been having trouble with the homework and, sorry, Marcus cut him off. Got a meeting to get to. He turned and walked away, their voices fading behind him. Yesterday, he would have given anything to have those kids notice him, talk to him. Today, it didn't seem to matter so much. At home, his mom was already there, wearing her good dress, the one she saved for parent-teacher conferences. Shower, she ordered as soon as he walked in. Your shirt's ironed on your bed. Marcus moved on autopilot. Shower, dress, attempt to tame his hair. His reflection looked strange to him. Still him, but different somehow. Ready? His mom stood in his doorway, her nurse's aide badge still pinned to her dress. She hadn't had time to change completely after her shift. What if they changed their mind? Marcus blurted out. His mother crossed the room, straightened his collar. Then you'll still be the boy who helped someone when they needed it. The boy who used what he knew to make a difference. She smiled. My boy. They took the bus to the Winchester building downtown, a gleaming tower of glass and steel. Marcus had passed it before, but never been inside. The security guard in the lobby looked at them suspiciously until Marcus showed Mr. Winchester's card. Then everything changed, directions to the right elevator, calls to announce their arrival, smiles and nods. Fancy, his mother whispered as they rode up to the top floor. The elevator opened directly into a waiting area where Emily sat in her wheelchair, doing homework. She looked up and broke into a huge grin. Marcus! Dad, they're here! Mr. Winchester stepped out of his office, jacket off, sleeves rolled up. He looked different here, more relaxed than he had that morning. Mrs. Thompson? He extended his hand to Marcus's mother. Thank you for coming on such short notice. Emily hasn't stopped talking about your son's physics lesson. Marcus watched his mother transform. Back straight, chin up, hand firm as she shook Mr. Winchester's. Despite her nurse's aide badge and simple dress, she looked every bit as dignified as the man in front of her. My Marcus, she said proudly, has always been good at explaining things. Emily wheeled over to them. Can I show them the ramp room while you talk business? Mr. Winchester nodded. Good idea. Marcus, why don't you go with Emily while I discuss details with your mother? The ramp room turned out to be a physical therapy space down the hall, complete with various inclines and surfaces. Emily wheeled straight to a medium slope. Watch this, she said, and proceeded to navigate it perfectly. Marcus grinned. You've been practicing. Well, duh. Had to make sure the physics still worked. They spent the next 20 minutes with Emily demonstrating her improved skills and Marcus offering small adjustments to her technique. It felt natural, easy like teaching physics class, but better. When they returned to the waiting area, their parents were shaking hands again. His mother's eyes were bright with unshed tears. Marcus, Mr. Winchester said, if you're willing, we'd like you to start next week. 3 afternoons, 2 hours each. Your mother and I have worked out the details. Emily pumped her fist. Yes. There's one condition, Mr. Winchester continued. He reached into his office and pulled out a bag. This has to be taken care of immediately. Marcus opened the bag. Inside was a new bicycle brake cable, professional grade, the kind he'd seen in repair shop windows, but could never afford. Can't have my daughter's physics tutor riding around with broken brakes, Mr. Winchester said. The bike shop downstairs will install it for you. Free of charge. Marcus looked at his mother. She nodded, smiling through her tears. Thank you, sir, Marcus managed to say. I won't let you down. I know you won't. Mr. Winchester glanced at his daughter. You already proved that this morning. As they rode the elevator down, Marcus's mother squeezed his hand. Baby, she whispered, your father walked out because he was weak. You stayed and got stronger. Never forget that. Marcus clutched the bag with the brake cable. Physics never lies, Mom. She laughed. Is that your new saying? Yeah. He smiled. I guess it is. Marcus woke before his alarm the next day. The new brake cable gleamed on his nightstand. The bike shop had stayed open late to install it, insisting that Mr. Winchester's orders meant immediate service. He lay in bed, running his fingers over the smooth metal housing. His old cable had been patched so many times he'd lost count. This one was different. Professional. Like him now, he supposed. Marcus. His mother's voice carried through the apartment. You up early too? Yeah. He got out of bed, pulled on his delivery clothes. They felt different today. Everything felt different. In the kitchen, his mother sat at their small table, still in her robe, staring at papers spread in front of her. What's all that? Employment contract. She looked up, dark circles under her eyes suggesting she hadn't slept much. Insurance forms, tax papers. Been reading them all night. Marcus poured himself a bowl of cereal. And she shuffled the papers. It's real, baby. All of it. The salary, the insurance, the college fund contribution. The what? Marcus nearly dropped his spoon. Mr. Winchester insisted. Said any young man who understands physics that well should be planning for college. Marcus sat heavily in the chair across from her. But that's too much. All I did was help his daughter down a ramp. No. His mother reached across the table, gripped his hand. You did what you always do. Saw a problem, figured out how to solve it, and didn't let anyone stop you from helping. That's worth something in this world. Before Marcus could respond, a deep rumble came from outside. A car engine, but not the usual morning traffic sound. His mother stood, went to the window. Her eyes widened. Marcus, she said slowly, there's a man in a suit getting out of a very expensive-looking SUV. Marcus joined her at the window. The black SUV gleamed in the early morning light, looking completely out of place in their neighborhood. The man in the suit was heading toward their building entrance. Even from above, Marcus recognized him, the Winchester's driver from yesterday. Their apartment buzzer sounded, making them both jump. I'll get it, his mother said, but Marcus was already moving. He pressed the intercom button. Hello, Marcus Thompson? Mr. Winchester sent me to pick you up for your route this morning. Marcus looked at his mother. She looked back, just as confused. I still have my bike, Marcus said into the intercom. Mr. Winchester's instructions were clear, sir. Your bike is already in the vehicle. We'll drop you at Mr. Chen's store. Marcus's mother was already moving, grabbing his delivery jacket, checking his hair. Mom, he protested, it's just a ride. It's never just a ride, baby. She straightened his collar. It's an opportunity. Now go. The SUV's interior smelled like new leather. Marcus's bike was indeed in the back, looking almost embarrassed among the luxury. Good morning, Mr. Thompson, the driver said formally. I'm Harrison. Mr. Winchester has arranged for morning transportation until you're comfortable with your new schedule. New schedule? Harrison pulled away from the curb smoothly. You'll be briefed at Mr. Chen's store. He's expecting us? The usually 20-minute walk to the store took 5 minutes in the SUV. People on the street stopped to stare as they passed. Mr. Chen was waiting outside his store, practically bouncing on his feet. Finally, he called as Marcus stepped out. Been waiting to show you the new setup. New setup? But Mr. Chen was already heading inside, waving for Marcus to follow. Harrison began unloading the bike. The store's back room had been reorganized. Maps covered one wall, with routes clearly marked in different colors. Your morning route's been optimized, Mr. Chen explained, pointing. No more zigzagging across town. Straight line delivery ends right at your school. Afternoon route's been eliminated. That's your Winchester time now. Marcus stared at the maps. You did all this last night? Mr. Winchester's office sent someone. Very efficient lady. Help reorganize everything. Mr. Chen grinned. Said something about maximizing productivity while maintaining educational priorities. Harrison appeared in the doorway. Bike's ready, Mr. Thompson. New rack system installed for better paper distribution. Marcus followed him outside. His bike looked different. The new brake cable was just the start. The delivery baskets had been replaced with professional carriers. The seat adjusted to proper height. Even the chain looked cleaner. Full maintenance schedule has been arranged with the shop, Harrison said. Weekly checks, monthly service. Marcus ran his hand along the frame. Same bike, but better. Like everything else since yesterday. Mr. Chen started loading papers into the new carriers. These are balanced for optimal weight distribution. No more leaning to one side. I don't know what to say, Marcus managed. Say nothing. Do good work. Mr. Chen handed him the day's delivery list. Now go. Harrison will follow in the SUV. Mr. Winchester's orders until you're comfortable with a new route. Marcus clipped on his helmet. Also new, he noticed, and started pedaling. The bike moved differently, smoother. The balanced weight made turning easier. Harrison followed at a discreet distance. The SUV's presence both strange and reassuring. The new route made sense. A clean line through his delivery area, no wasted motion. Even the hills seemed easier with the properly maintained bike. At the Winchester house, Emily was waiting by the ramp. Morning, she called. Watch this. She took the ramp with perfect form, controlling her speed exactly as they'd practiced. At the bottom, she spun her chair in a victory circle. Physics for the win, she declared. Marcus laughed, handing her family's paper to her instead of placing it on the porch. Nice form, he said. You've been practicing. Dad installed a practice ramp in the therapy room. Not as steep as this one, but good for learning. She looked at his bike, nodded approvingly. Much better, though I still think you should let me help with the maintenance schedule. I've been reading about bike mechanics. Of course you have. Emily grinned. Hey, if you're teaching me physics, I should teach you something too. Behind them, Harrison waited patiently in the SUV. The morning sun had fully risen, making everything look bright and new. See you this afternoon? Emily asked. Yeah, more physics. Actually, she looked slightly embarrassed. I was hoping you could help me with my math homework too. Since you're so good with numbers and stuff. Marcus felt something warm in his chest. Not just a job, he realized. A real chance to help. Sure, he said. Math is just physics without the moving parts, right? Emily laughed. See? You're already a good teacher. As Marcus rode on to his next delivery, Harrison following at a respectful distance, he thought about his mother's words from last night. His father had walked away from challenges. But Marcus? Marcus was riding straight toward them, on a well-maintained bike, with a new brake cable that would never let him down. The morning stretched ahead of him, full of possibility. He had papers to deliver, physics to teach, and for the first time in a long time, a clear path forward. Marcus stood in front of the Winchester Mansion's main entrance, his newly pressed shirt feeling stiff against his skin. First day on the job, official this time, not just a chance encounter on a newspaper route. "Good afternoon, Mr. Thompson," Carl the security guard said, opening the door. No suspicion in his voice now, just professional courtesy. "Afternoon, Carl." Marcus nodded, still getting used to being addressed so formally. Inside, the house was quiet except for piano music drifting from somewhere upstairs. Emily's music lesson. He'd memorized her schedule during the orientation. Mrs. Winchester appeared from a side room, elegant in a business suit. "Marcus, good timing. Emily's just finishing up. Would you like some water while you wait?" "No, thank you, ma'am." He stood straight, remembering his mother's coaching. "I'll just review my notes." She smiled approvingly. Emily's been talking about physics all weekend. Even tried to explain momentum to her little brother. The piano music stopped, followed by the sound of wheelchair wheels on hardwood floors. "Marcus." Emily appeared at the top of the grand staircase, near the elevator. "You're early." "Professional courtesy," he replied, using one of Mr. Winchester's phrases. Emily rolled her eyes as she entered the elevator. "You sound like Dad." The elevator descended smoothly, and Emily wheeled out with practiced ease. She'd been working on her chair control. That was obvious immediately. "Ready for today's session?" Marcus asked, falling in a step beside her wheelchair. "Actually," Emily grinned. "Dad set up something special in the therapy room." The therapy room had changed since Marcus's last visit. New equipment lined the walls, and in the center stood what looked like a miniature version of the front entrance ramp. "Dad had it built over the weekend," Emily explained. "Said if we're going to do physics lessons, we should have proper equipment." Mr. Winchester himself stood by the new ramp, jacket off, sleeves rolled up. Marcus, what do you think of our new teaching tool?" Marcus walked around the ramp, examining the construction. "Variable angle adjustment," he noted, "and the surface can be changed." "Good eye." Mr. Winchester pointed to a stack of panels. "Different textures, different friction coefficients. Thought it might help with the practical demonstrations." "This is—" Marcus shook his head in amazement. "This is actually perfect for teaching the concepts." "Excellent. I'll leave you both to it." Mr. Winchester headed for the door, then paused. "Oh, and Marcus? The engineering firm that built this was impressed by your specifications. They'd like to consult with you on other accessibility projects." After he left, Emily wheeled up to the ramp. "Ready to teach me more physics, Professor?" "Professor." Marcus laughed. "I'm just a kid who understands momentum." "Yeah? Tell that to my math grade." Emily pulled a paper from her backpack. "Got an A on that test you helped me study for?" Marcus remembered their study session, breaking down the problems into simple steps, just like the ramp descent. "That was all you," he said. "I just help with the approach." Speaking of approach, Emily positioned her wheelchair at the base of the practice ramp. "Think you could help me figure out the perfect angle for speed versus control?" For the next hour, they experimented with different ramp angles and surfaces. Emily took notes, calculated formulas, and practiced until each movement was smooth and confident. "You know," she said during a water break, "before you came along, I hated anything to do with physics or math. Thought it was just boring numbers." Marcus adjusted the ramp's angle slightly. "What changed?" "You made it real. Made it matter." She spun her chair in a perfect circle. "Now I see physics everywhere. In everything I do." A knock at the door interrupted them. Harrison stood there, car keys in hand. "Marcus, your mother called. She'd like you to stop by the hospital on your way home." Marcus felt a flash of worry, but Harrison smiled. "Nothing wrong. She just wanted to show you something." Emily waved him off. "Go. I need to practice anyway." "Same time tomorrow?" "Same time. Maybe we can start on advanced friction coefficients." "Nerd," she called after him, but her voice was fond. The SUV ride to the hospital was quick. Marcus still wasn't used to being driven around, but Harrison had a way of making it feel normal. His mother was waiting outside the staff entrance, practically glowing with excitement. "Baby, look." She held up a letter. "The hospital's offering nursing classes. Employee Education Program. Mr. Winchester. He must have said something to the board. Marcus hugged her, the letter crackling between them. That's amazing, Mom. We're both students now, she laughed, wiping her eyes. Both moving up in the world. On the ride home, Marcus thought about everything that had changed in just a few days. His bike was fixed, his route was organized, and he had a real job doing something he was good at. But more than that, he had direction, purpose, a way to use what he knew to help others. Harrison pulled up in front of their apartment building. Same time tomorrow morning, Mr. Thompson? Actually, Marcus looked at his bike, secured safely in the back. I think I'll ride tomorrow. The whole way? Harrison nodded approvingly. Very good, sir. The SUV will be available if you need it. Inside their apartment, Marcus's mother spread her nursing program materials across the kitchen table. Look at us, she said softly. Look how far we've come from just a few days ago. Marcus touched the new brake cable on his bike, thinking about the chain of events that had led here. One morning, one ramp, one chance to help someone understand something he loved. His phone buzzed, a text from Emily. Practice the 15-degree angle 10 times. Perfect control. Physics never lies. Marcus smiled, typing back, proud of you. Keep calculating those angles. His mother watched him, her eyes soft. You're good at this, baby. Teaching, helping, making things make sense for people. Yeah. Marcus looked around their small apartment, seeing it differently now. Not just a place they ended up after his father left, but a starting point. A launch pad. You know what I realized, he said. Dad left because he couldn't handle the hard stuff. But the hard stuff, that's where all the good things happen. His mother nodded, tears in her eyes. Like helping a scared girl down a ramp? Like that? Marcus grinned. Though technically, that was just physics. No, baby. She hugged him tight. That was you. Physics just helped you show who you really are. Outside their window, the city was settling into evening. Somewhere out there, Emily was probably still practicing her ramp techniques. Mr. Winchester was signing papers in his tower office. Mr. Chin was planning tomorrow's delivery routes. And here, in their small apartment, Marcus and his mother sat surrounded by textbooks and dreams, planning their own angles of ascent. Physics never lies, Marcus thought. But sometimes it does more than just tell the truth. Sometimes it opens doors, builds bridges, and shows you exactly who you're meant to be.